After Sulla's death, Caesar returned to Rome and began to build his political career. He served as an orator and lawyer, honing his rhetorical skills and his ability to persuade the public. He was known for his eloquence, his charisma, and his ability to connect with the Roman plebs. He also served in various public offices, such as quaestor, aedile, and preacher, gaining experience in administration and governance. His ascent was driven by a combination of factors: his patrician lineage, which gave him prestige, his personal charisma, which gave him popularity among the plebs, and his relentless ambition, which propelled him to seek power. He did not hesitate to use money, often borrowed, to finance his political campaigns and to bribe voters. He also built strategic alliances with powerful figures like Crassus, Rome's richest man, and Pompey the Great, Rome's greatest general. Julius Caesar's youth was marked by a dangerous and existential rivalry with Lucius Cornelius Sulla, the dictator of Rome. Sulla, a brilliant general and a ruthless politician, had waged a brutal civil war against Gaius Marius, Caesar's political uncle. Sulla's victory resulted in bloody proscriptions, where thousands of political enemies were executed and their properties confiscated. Caesar, due to his connection with Marius, he was married to Cornelia, daughter of a Marius ally, and his aunt was married to Marius, was immediately marked by Sulla as an enemy. Sulla demanded that Caesar divorce Cornelia and renounce his ties to Marius's faction. Caesar, in an act of defiance and courage, refused to do so. This refusal put his life in imminent danger. In 54 BC, Caesar launched a second and larger invasion of Britannia. He brought a larger force with him and managed to penetrate deeper into the island, defeating tribes and crossing the Thames. However, British resistance, led by Cassivellaunus, was tenacious, and Caesar, again, was forced to retreat due to logistical problems and the need to return to Gaul to deal with revolts. The invasions of Britannia did not result in a permanent conquest, but they were a remarkable feat, which expanded Roman knowledge of the island and demonstrated Caesar's daring. Caesar also carried out incursions into Germania, east of the Rhine River, in 55 and 53 BC. He built bridges over the Rhine, an impressive engineering feat, and marched into Germanic territory, seeking to intimidate the Germanic tribes and prevent them from supporting the Gauls. The incursions into Germania were swift and brutal, with Caesar massacring tribes that resisted and demonstrating Roman military superiority. These incursions into Britannia and Germania, although they did not result in permanent conquests, were crucial for Caesar's reputation in Rome. They presented him as a conqueror who dared to go beyond the known limits, a general who rivaled the achievements of Alexander the Great. His military glory grew exponentially, and he became an increasingly powerful and dangerous figure for his political rivals in Rome. After the victory at Alesia and the subjugation of Vercingetorix, Julius Caesar dedicated the last years of his campaigns in Gaul to the consolidation of Roman power and the pacification of the province. Gaul, which was once a mosaic of independent tribes, was transformed into a Roman province, a vast territory stretching from the Rhine to the Pyrenees. Caesar was not only a conqueror, he was a shrewd administrator. He implemented policies to integrate Gaul into the Roman Empire, establishing cities, building roads, and promoting trade. He also granted Roman citizenship to some Gallic leaders, seeking to win their loyalty and integrate local elites into the Roman system. This policy of integration, in contrast to the brutality of his previous campaigns, aimed to ensure the stability and prosperity of the new province.
The most infamous day in Roman history, and a turning point for the Republic's destiny, the Ides of March, 44 BC. On that fateful day, Julius Caesar, the man who had conquered Gaul, won the Civil War, and become Rome's dictator for life, was brutally assassinated by a group of conspiring senators. Despite warnings and omens, His wife Calpurnia had a premonitory nightmare, and a soothsayer warned him about the Ides of March. Caesar, with his arrogance and his belief in his own destiny, ignored the dangers. He went to the Senate, which was meeting at the theater of Pompey, without his personal guard, an act of trust that would prove fatal. Upon entering the Senate, Caesar was surrounded by the conspirators. Publius Servilius Casca was the first to strike him, delivering a blow to his neck. Caesar tried to resist, but was overwhelmed by the conspirators, who stabbed him repeatedly. Legend has it that upon seeing Marcus Junius Brutus, one of his protégés, and supposedly his illegitimate son, among the assassins, Caesar reportedly uttered the famous phrase in Greek, "Kai su, teknon?" You too, child? Or, more commonly, et tu, brute? This phrase, though probably apocryphal, encapsulates the betrayal and pain of that moment. 23 dagger blows sealed Julius Caesar's fate. He fell at the foot of the statue of his old rival, Pompey the Great, an ironic end for a man who had defeated his enemy and taken control of Rome. Caesar's assassination was a shocking act of violence, a blow aimed at restoring the Republic, which, paradoxically, would destroy it forever.
The first triumvirate, the secret alliance between Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus, had dissolved. Crassus had died in a disastrous campaign against the Parthians in 53 BC. The death of Julia, Caesar's daughter and Pompey's wife, in 54 BC removed the last family tie that united Rome's two greatest men. The rivalry between Caesar and Pompey, which had been contained by the alliance, exploded into a struggle for power. The Senate, dominated by the conservative Optimates faction, led by figures like Cato the Younger, saw Caesar as a rising tyrant. They feared that upon returning to Rome with his loyal army, Caesar would use his military power to overthrow the Republic and establish a dictatorship. His prolonged absence from Rome, though necessary for the conquest of Gaul, also allowed his enemies to conspire against him, seeking to undermine his authority and his reputation. Tensions escalated rapidly. The Senate demanded that Caesar resign his military command and return to Rome as an ordinary citizen to face accusations of illegalities during his consulship and his campaigns in Gaul. Caesar, in turn, demanded that Pompey also resign his military command and that both be allowed to run for consulship in absentia, in their absence. The Senate, manipulated by Caesar's enemies, refused to yield. The situation reached a stalemate. Caesar knew that if he returned to Rome as an ordinary citizen, he would be prosecuted and his political career would be ruined. He had to choose between obeying the Senate and risking his ruin or defying the Republic and starting a civil war. Rome's destiny was in his hands, and the decision he would make would forever change the course of history. Julius Caesar's decision to defy the Senate's authority and start a civil war is one of the most emblematic moments in Roman history. In January 49 BC, Caesar was camped with his legion, the Legio XIII Gemina, on the banks of the Rubicon River, a small river that marked the border between the province of Cisalpine Gaul and Italy. Roman law forbade a general from crossing the Rubicon with an armed army, under penalty of being declared a public enemy.
Julius Caesar's ascent to absolute power, his appointment as dictator for life, and his ambitious reforms generated envy and fear among Republican senators. Although Caesar was popular among the plebs and his veterans, the Roman aristocracy, which had been marginalized and stripped of its power, saw in him an existential threat to the Republic and their own liberties. For them, Caesar was not a reformer, but a rising tyrant, a man who had destroyed Republican institutions and sought to establish a monarchy. The fear of tyranny was real. Rome's history was marked by the expulsion of kings and the founding of the Republic to avoid the rule of a single man.
Caesar, by accumulating so much power in his hands, seemed to be reviving the ghosts of the past. His actions, such as sitting in a golden chair in the Senate or having statues erected in his honor, were seen as signs of his monarchical ambition. The conspiracy to assassinate Caesar began to form among a group of senators, many of them former allies and even beneficiaries of Caesar, but who considered themselves defenders of the Republic. The leaders of the conspiracy were Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus. Brutus, in particular, was a man respected for his integrity and his lineage. He was a descendant of the Brutus who had expelled the last king of Rome, and his participation conferred moral legitimacy on the conspiracy. The conspirators believed that by assassinating Caesar, they would be saving the Republic and restoring Rome's liberty. They saw the act as a necessary sacrifice to preserve republican values and prevent the rise of a monarchy. The conspiracy was kept secret, with the conspirators meeting in discreet locations and planning the time and place of the assassination. The stage was set for one of the most dramatic and bloody acts in Roman history. Initially, Caesar acted with speed and surprise, taking control of Italy without great resistance. Pompey and the senators who had fled Rome retreated to Greece, where Pompey, with his vast resources and his experience in the East, began to raise a colossal army. Caesar, without a fleet to pursue them immediately, consolidated his control over Italy and Hispania, defeating the legions loyal to Pompey in the Iberian Peninsula. The decisive confrontation between Caesar and Pompey occurred in Greece. The first major battle was at Dyrrhachium, 48 BC, where Pompey, with a numerically superior army, managed to inflict a defeat on Caesar. However, Caesar managed to avoid annihilation and retreated, seeking a new opportunity for confrontation. The final and decisive battle was at Pharsalus, 48 BC, in Thessaly, Greece. Pompey, with a much larger army, about 45,000 men against Caesar's 22,000, was confident of victory. However, Caesar, with his tactical genius and the discipline of his veteran legions, managed to crush Pompey's forces. Caesar used a daring tactic, hiding a fourth line of infantry to attack the flank of Pompey's cavalry, which was his main strength. The victory at Pharsalus was overwhelming for Caesar. Pompey, seeing his army's defeat, fled the battlefield, seeking refuge in Egypt. However, he would be assassinated by order of the young king Ptolemy XIII's advisors, who hoped to please Caesar. Pompey's death marked the end of the civil war and Caesar's victory. The Roman Republic, which had been torn apart by decades of internal conflicts, was now under the control of a single man. The Civil War was a testament to Caesar's military genius and his relentless determination to achieve supreme power. Imagine an empire. Not an empire governed by a single king or emperor, but a vast republic that for centuries had dominated the Mediterranean, spreading its law, its culture, and its military might across 3 continents. Think of Rome in the 1st century BC, an era of intense transformation, of colossal wealth, and of internal conflicts that threatened to tear apart the very fabric of its existence. It was a colossus, but a colossus that, at its peak, began to feel the cracks in its foundations. The air was charged with a palpable tension. Republican institutions, forged over centuries to prevent tyranny and ensure liberty, were under pressure. Rome's relentless expansion had brought unprecedented wealth, but also glaring social inequality. Land, once the basis of Roman citizenship, was concentrated in the hands of a few patricians, while the plebeians, impoverished and landless, migrated to the cities, creating a mass of discontent.
Political ambition, once contained by traditions and laws, now manifested in a rampant pursuit of personal power, with generals and politicians openly challenging the Senate's authority. This is not just a tale of wars and conquests, but the saga of a republic writhing under the weight of its own greatness, of a political system that, in its quest for dominion, sowed the seeds of its own destruction. And at the center of this storm, a figure would emerge, who with his military genius, his political vision, and his limitless ambition, would shape Rome's destiny, transforming it from a republic into an empire, and leaving a legacy that would echo for millennia. To understand the revolution that Julius Caesar would bring, it is essential to delve into the foundations of the Roman Republic. Founded in 509 BC, after the expulsion of the Etruscan kings, the Republic was a complex system of government designed to prevent tyranny and ensure citizen participation. Its power was divided among the Senate, the popular assemblies, and the magistrates, consuls, praetors, aediles, etc. The Senate, composed of the most influential patricians, was the most powerful body, controlling foreign policy, finance, and legislation.
His strategy was ruthless: divide and conquer. He exploited the internal divisions among the Gallic tribes, allying with some to defeat others. He also used a policy of terror, massacring tribes that resisted and enslaving entire populations to instill fear and force submission. The brutality of his campaigns in Gaul was immense, with millions of Gauls killed or enslaved. One of the most famous battles was Alesia, 52 BC, the final siege against Vercingetorix, the leader of the unified Gallic resistance. Caesar built two lines of fortifications, one to besiege Alesia and another to defend against a Gallic relief army attempting to free Vercingetorix. This feat of engineering and military strategy was a testament to Caesar's genius. The victory at Alesia marked the end of Gallic resistance and the definitive conquest of Gaul by Rome. Julius Caesar's ambition was not content with the conquest of Gaul. He sought glory beyond the known limits of the Roman world, and his incursions into Britannia and Germania were a testament to his audacity and his thirst for recognition. In 55 BC, Caesar launched his first invasion of Britannia, a mysterious and legendary island that, to the Romans, was the edge of the known world. The invasion was a reconnaissance expedition, more than a large-scale conquest. Caesar landed on the coast of Kent, facing fierce resistance from British tribes. He managed to establish a bridgehead, but was forced to retreat due to storms and lack of supplies.
After Cornelia's death, Caesar married Pompeia, Sulla's granddaughter. This marriage was a political alliance, seeking to reconcile with Sulla's faction and consolidate his position in Rome. However, the marriage to Pompeia ended in divorce after the Clodius scandal, who invaded Caesar's house during a sacred female ritual. Caesar, in his famous phrase, declared that Caesar's wife must be above suspicion, divorcing Pompeia to protect his political reputation. His last marriage was with Calpurnia, daughter of Lucius Calpurnius Piso Caesoninus, an influential consul. This marriage was another political alliance, which helped Caesar consolidate his position in Rome and gain support for his ambitions. Calpurnia remained loyal to Caesar until the end, and legend has it that she had a premonitory nightmare about his death the night before his assassination. Despite his strategic marriages, Caesar was a family man. He was dedicated to his daughter Julia, and her premature death in 54 BC was a deep blow to him. Julia was married to Pompey the Great, and her death weakened the alliance between Caesar and Pompey, contributing to the future civil war. Caesar was also known for his extramarital affairs, including his famous affair with Cleopatra, which would result in the birth of Caesarion. Family and Roman traditions were important to Caesar, but he used them as tools for his own political goals. He was a man of limitless ambition, and his personal life was intrinsically linked to his pursuit of power and glory. Although his political ambition was evident from an early age, Julius Caesar's true ascent to power would be forged on the battlefield. His first military experiences, though in minor positions, were crucial for his formation as a general. Caesar served as military tribune in Asia Minor in his youth, where he had the opportunity to observe Roman military tactics and learn about the logistics of campaigns. He also served in military campaigns in Cilicia and Hispania, gaining experience in combat and troop leadership. These experiences, though not large-scale, gave him a practical understanding of war and military discipline.
As a politician and reformer, Caesar was a man of vision. He understood the need to reform the republic so that it could govern such a vast empire. His reforms to the calendar, provincial administration, and law had a lasting impact. He paved the way for the Roman Empire, and his name became synonymous with power and authority, hence the titles Caesar, Kaiser, and Czar. However, his legacy is also marked by controversies. He was a man of limitless ambition who defied the republic's laws and traditions to achieve absolute power. His brutality in some of his campaigns and his suppression of political opposition are dark aspects of his history. He was a dictator, and his ascent to power marked the end of the Roman Republic. His figure became a cultural icon, inspiring countless works of literature, art, theater, and cinema. From Shakespeare to Hollywood, Caesar continues to be a source of fascination, a symbol of power, ambition, and tragedy. His life is a testament to the power of a single man to change the course of history, to transform a republic into an empire, and to leave an indelible mark on Western civilization.
Caesar knew what was at stake. Crossing the Rubicon meant starting a civil war against the Roman Republic, a war that could cost him everything: his life, his reputation, and Rome's destiny. He hesitated, pondered the consequences, but his ambition and his determination not to submit to his enemies prevailed. In a moment of deep reflection, he is said to have uttered the famous phrase, "Alea jacta est," the die is cast. With that declaration, Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon with his legion. There was no turning back. The act of crossing the river was a direct challenge to the Senate and a declaration of war. He was marching on Rome, not as an enemy, but as a defender of his own rights and the Roman plebes, whom he believed were being oppressed by the senatorial aristocracy. News of the Rubicon crossing spread rapidly through Rome, causing panic and confusion. Pompey the Great, who had been appointed by the Senate to defend the Republic, was surprised by Caesar's speed and audacity. He and many senators fled Rome, offering no resistance, abandoning the city to Caesar's advance. The crossing of the Rubicon was not just a military act, it was a political and symbolic act that marked the end of the Roman Republic. It demonstrated Caesar's unwavering determination, his willingness to risk everything to achieve his goals. Rome's destiny was now in the hands of a single man, and the civil war that would follow would tear apart the empire and forever transform the face of the Roman world. Julius Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon unleashed the bloodiest and most decisive civil war in Roman history, a direct confrontation between Rome's two greatest generals, Caesar and Pompey the Great. It was a fight for control of Rome, a battle that would decide whether the Republic would survive or give way to a new type of government. The Roman legion, the fundamental unit of the army, was a force of engineering and combat. Each legion was composed of thousands of men, divided into centuries and cohorts, each with its own standard and its own pride. Legionaries were rigorously trained in combat tactics, maneuvers, fortification construction, and logistics. They were capable of marching for tens of kilometers a day, building fortified camps in a few hours, and fighting with a discipline and effectiveness that crushed their enemies. However, from Marius's reforms in the late 2nd century BC, the army's loyalty began to shift. Before, soldiers were citizen landowners who served for a limited time and fought for the Republic. With Marius's reforms, the army became a professional force composed of landless volunteers who served for long periods and who depended on their generals for land and rewards after service. This created a personal and unwavering loyalty between soldiers and their generals, and no longer to the Senate or the Republic. Ambitious generals like Marius, Sulla, Pompey, and later Julius Caesar could use their loyal armies as political tools, forcing the Senate to yield to their demands or to fight in civil wars. The army, which had been the pillar of the Republic, became its greatest threat, capable of overthrowing governments and imposing the will of a single man. This transformation of the Roman army was a crucial factor in the decline of the Republic. It provided the military power for ambitious leaders who sought total control of Rome, and its personal loyalty would be a vital instrument in the rise of Julius Caesar, a man who understood the power of the army and the importance of its loyalty.
The conspirators, believing they had saved the Republic, marched through the Forum, proclaiming liberty. However, the Roman people, who loved Caesar and saw him as their defender, reacted with fury and mourning. Caesar's assassination did not bring peace. It unleashed a new and bloodier phase of the Roman Civil War, which would culminate in the definitive end of the Republic and the birth of an empire. The assassination of Julius Caesar in 44 BC did not bring the freedom the conspirators hoped for. It plunged Rome into even deeper chaos. The death of the dictator for life created an immense power vacuum, an abyss that would drag the Roman world into a new and more brutal civil war. Caesar's assassins, who saw themselves as defenders of the Republic, drastically underestimated the reaction of the Roman people and Caesar's loyalists. The immediate consequences were devastating. The Roman people, who loved Caesar and saw him as their benefactor, reacted with fury. Caesar's funeral, where Mark Antony, his loyal right-hand man, delivered an impassioned speech, incited the crowd against the conspirators. Brutus and Cassius, the leaders of the conspiracy, were forced to flee Rome. Two names immediately stood out as the principal heirs to Caesar's vast influence: Mark Antony and Octavian. Mark Antony, a charismatic general and a veteran of countless campaigns, possessed the support of the legions and a formidable military leader reputation. He was the obvious figure to inherit Caesar's mantle. However, Caesar's will revealed a shocking surprise. His 18-year-old grandnephew, Octavian, a young man who until then was relatively unknown in Roman public life, had been named his principal adopted heir. This act transformed young Octavian into Antony's principal rival, creating a rivalry that would drive the next years of civil war.
After the victory at Pharsalus and Pompey's death, Julius Caesar did not immediately return to Rome. His journey would lead him to a series of campaigns in the East, which would consolidate his power and bring him into contact with legendary figures. His first stop was Egypt, 48 to 47 BC, where he became involved in the dynastic dispute between the young queen Cleopatra VII and her brother Ptolemy XIII. Caesar, fascinated by Cleopatra's intelligence and charisma, took her side, leading to the Alexandrian Civil War. After months of intense fighting, Caesar and Cleopatra defeated Ptolemy XIII. His stay in Egypt resulted in the birth of Caesarion, son of Caesar and Cleopatra, an event of immense political and personal significance.
Leaving Cleopatra on the Egyptian throne, Caesar marched north to Pontus, modern-day Turkey, where he quickly defeated King Pharnaces II, who had taken advantage of the Roman civil war to expand his kingdom. The victory was so swift and decisive that Caesar is said to have uttered the famous phrase, Veni, Vidi, Vici, I came, I saw, I conquered, a testament to his speed and military effectiveness. Back in Rome for a brief period, Caesar had to deal with the remaining opposition from the Republicans. He then set out for Africa, 46 BC, where the last Pompeian forces, led by Cato the Younger and Scipio, had gathered. The Battle of Thapsus was a decisive victory for Caesar, who crushed the Republican forces. Cato, to avoid capture, committed suicide, becoming a symbol of Republican resistance. These campaigns in the East were not merely military victories. They consolidated Caesar's power and eliminated the last vestiges of organized opposition to his authority. He demonstrated his ability to lead campaigns in different theaters of war and to defeat diverse enemies. Caesar was now the undisputed master of the Roman world, and his return to Rome would be an unprecedented triumph.
Joined by Lepidus, another of Caesar's generals, they formed the Second Triumvirate. Formally, this pact between Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus had as its main objective to hunt down Caesar's assassins, Brutus and Cassius, and restore order in Rome. But in practice, it was an alliance of convenience, marked by mutual distrust and personal ambition. Prescriptions, lists of political enemies to be eliminated and whose properties would be confiscated, returned with brutal force, claiming the lives of thousands of Romans. The civil war that followed was bloody and relentless. The triumvir's forces crushed Brutus and Cassius's armies at the Battle of Philippi, 42 BC, avenging Caesar's death. However, the rivalry between Antony and Octavian would intensify, culminating in a new civil war that would decide Rome's destiny. Caesar's assassination, far from restoring the Republic, paved the way for the birth of an empire.
The Roman Empire, born from the ashes of the Republic and Caesar's legacy, would embark on a new chapter in its history, facing the challenges of consolidation, expansion, and power maintenance.
Gaul, today most of France, was at the time a vast and complex region, inhabited by various Celtic tribes, many of them in conflict with each other and with the Romans. Cisalpine Gaul, northern Italy, was already a Roman province, but Narbonne Gaul, southern France, was a newly conquered province, and the borders with independent tribes were porous and unstable. The position of proconsul of Gaul offered Caesar a unique opportunity, a vast territory to govern, a considerable army to command, and the prospect of military glory through new conquests. Caesar understood the potential of Gaul. Away from the political intrigues of Rome, he would have the freedom to build his own army, to accumulate wealth through plunder, and to forge a military reputation that would rival Pompey's. He knew that military glory was the key to political power in Rome, and Gaul was the ideal place to achieve it. His appointment as proconsul of Gaul was a brilliant strategic move. It removed him from the political spotlight in Rome, where his enemies in the Senate could try to undermine his power, and placed him in a position where he could build an independent power base. He would have a vast territory to administer, a loyal army to command, and the opportunity to become a military hero. Gaul, which was once seen as a secondary province, would become the stage for Caesar's greatest conquest, and the crucible where the future emperor would be forged. His journey to glory was about to begin. In the next 8 years, from 58 to 50 BC, Julius Caesar launched a series of military campaigns that would not only conquer all of Gaul, but also transform him into one of history's greatest generals. The Gallic Wars were a testament to Caesar's military genius, his ability to lead, to innovate, and to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. Caesar faced a myriad of Celtic tribes, many of them fierce and independent, who tenaciously resisted the Roman invasion. He employed a combination of innovative tactics, siege engineering, and a speed of maneuver that caught his enemies by surprise. He was a master at building fortifications, bridges, and siege engines, capable of overcoming any defense.
After years of wars and conquests, Julius Caesar returned to Rome in 46 BC, a victorious conqueror and the undisputed master of the Roman world. His entry into Rome was a spectacle of pomp and grandeur, a series of 4 triumphs celebrating his victories in Gaul, Egypt, Pontus, and Africa. Each triumph was a display of his power, his riches, and his prisoners, a visual reminder of his military glory. Caesar's triumphs were the greatest and most spectacular Rome had ever seen. He displayed vast amounts of gold and silver, treasures plundered from his campaigns, and thousands of prisoners, including Vercingetorix, the Gallic leader who was executed during the triumph. His popularity among the Roman plebs was immense. He distributed money and grain, organized games and public spectacles, and sponsored construction projects that benefited the city. With power firmly in his hands, Caesar initiated a series of ambitious reforms in Rome. He was named Dictator for Life, a title that conferred absolute power, and that, for many, was the end of the Republic. He reformed the calendar, creating the Julian calendar, which would be used for centuries, reorganized provincial administration, granted Roman citizenship to many conquered peoples, and initiated vast public construction projects. He also sought to reform law and justice, aiming to create a more efficient and equitable system. Caesar was a man of vision, who understood the need to reform the Republic so that it could govern such a vast empire. He believed that the centralization of power was essential for Rome's stability and prosperity. However, his reforms and his absolute power generated envy and fear among the Republican senators, who saw in him a threat to the Republic's liberty and traditions. His ascent to absolute power was a moment of transformation for Rome. The Republic, which had been torn apart by decades of internal conflicts, was now under the control of a single man. Caesar was the master of the Roman world, and his limitless ambition would lead him to dream of new conquests, but also to face the opposition of those who refused to accept the end of the Republic. The stage was set for the final act of Julius Caesar's life.
It was in this scenario of a republic in crisis, where ambition and military power clashed, that on July 13th, 100 BC, in the city of Rome, Gaius Julius Caesar was born. He came into the world into one of Rome's oldest and noblest patrician families, the gens Julia, a lineage that dated back to the city's beginnings, and that, according to legend, descended from the goddess Venus and the Trojan hero Aeneas. Although his family was ancient and distinguished, the gens Julia was not particularly rich or influential at the time of Caesar's birth. They were patricians, but not at the center of political power in Rome. However, his lineage, with its legendary connection to the gods, would give Caesar an aura of destiny and a basis for his future ambitions. Caesar's childhood was spent in Rome during a period of intense political turbulence. He grew up amidst the civil wars between Marius, his political uncle through his aunt's marriage, and Sulla, witnessing the brutality of Roman politics and the fragility of the Republic. He saw proscriptions, massacres, and the rise and fall of powerful generals. This early experience would shape his worldview, teaching him the need to be ruthless to survive and to achieve power. It is said that at his birth,
or in the years that followed, there were omens, divine signs that this child would be different, that his life would be marked by an extraordinary destiny. For the Romans, the interpretation of the heavens and natural phenomena was crucial. Regardless of legends, the fact is that the stage was set for one of history's most enigmatic and powerful figures. Caesar was born at a turning point, at the twilight of one era and the dawn of another. He would not just be a politician, he would be a conqueror, a reformer, and a man who, through his genius, his cunning, and his limitless ambition, would dare to defy the inevitable, transforming Rome forever. His journey was just beginning, and the ancient world would never be the same.
Gaul became a source of vast wealth for Rome, providing grain, cattle, slaves, and mineral resources. Its conquest also provided Caesar with an invaluable power base. He had an army of loyal veterans who adored him and would follow him in any endeavor. He had amassed a colossal fortune, which would be crucial to finance his future political ambitions in Rome. The conquest of Gaul was Caesar's greatest military feat. It demonstrated his genius as a general, his ability to lead, to innovate, and to overcome challenges. It also transformed him into a figure of unprecedented power and prestige in Rome. However, his military glory and his growing popularity among the Roman plebs would begin to generate envy and fear among his political rivals in the Senate. His prolonged absence from Rome, though necessary for the conquest of Gaul, also allowed his enemies to conspire against him. The consolidation of power in Gaul was Caesar's last great act as proconsul. He had transformed a distant province into a vital part of the Roman Empire, and his conquest would be a landmark in Rome's history. However, his return to Rome, with his loyal army and his reputation for invincibility, would unleash a new and bloody phase of Roman history: civil war. After 9 years of glorious conquests in Gaul, Julius Caesar had become Rome's most powerful man. His military glory and immense wealth, amassed through plunder and the sale of slaves, rivaled those of Pompey the Great. His army of loyal veterans adored him, and his popularity among the Roman plebs was unparalleled. However, Caesar's meteoric ascent generated envy and fear among his political rivals in the Senate, who saw him as an existential threat to the Republic. Sulla, in his fury, included Caesar's name on the proscription lists, condemning him to death. Caesar was forced to flee Rome and hide, living as a fugitive. This period of danger and uncertainty was a brutal lesson for the young patrician. He witnessed the cruelty of Roman politics, the fragility of life, and the need to be ruthless to survive. However, Caesar managed to survive, thanks to the intervention of influential friends and family who interceded with Sulla. Caesar's life was spared. Sulla reluctantly yielded, but reportedly said, "In that young man there are many Mariuses," a premonition of the ambition and danger Caesar would pose to the Republic. The rivalry with Sulla was a formative experience for Caesar. It taught him the importance of survival, cunning, and the need to build powerful alliances. He understood that Roman politics was a game of life or death, and that weakness was an invitation to annihilation. This early experience of danger and persecution forged in Caesar a steel determination and a deep understanding of the nature of power, preparing him for the challenges that awaited him in his ascent. Julius Caesar's personal life, though often overshadowed by his military and political conquests, was marked by strategic marriages and an attention to family and Roman traditions. In a society where marriage was frequently a political tool, Caesar used his unions to strengthen his position and to forge alliances. His first important marriage was with Cornelia, daughter of Lucius Cornelius Cinna, an ally of Marius. This marriage, though risky during Sulla's proscriptions, demonstrated Caesar's loyalty to Marius's faction and his willingness to defy established power. Cornelia gave Caesar his only legitimate daughter, Julia. Cornelia's death in 69 BC was a blow to Caesar, whom he loved.
His education was not limited to academic studies. He was trained in the arts of war, as was expected of every young Roman of his class. He learned to ride, use the sword and spear, and understand military tactics. This practical training would be crucial for his future career as a general. He was also exposed to Roman public life from an early age, observing debates in the forum, intrigues in the Senate, and the ambitions of politicians. One of the most important aspects of his youth was the influence of his political uncle, Gaius Marius. Marius, a homo novus, new man without consular ancestors, had become a powerful general and consul, challenging the traditional aristocracy. His rivalry with Sulla and his military reforms, which professionalized the army and made it loyal to its generals, left an indelible mark on Caesar. He witnessed firsthand how military power could be used to challenge the Senate's authority and to achieve political goals. This early observation would shape his own approach to power. Caesar was also exposed to Hellenistic culture, which was popular among the Roman elite. He studied Greek, the language of philosophy and science, and became familiar with the works of great Greek thinkers. This exposure to Greek culture would influence his own worldview and his taste for luxury and refinement. Caesar's youth was, therefore, a period of intense learning and observation, where he absorbed the lessons of politics, war, and culture, preparing him for the ascent that awaited him. Julius Caesar's rise in Roman politics was a long and arduous path, marked by challenges, risks, and relentless ambition. In a republic dominated by factions and powerful generals, Caesar had to navigate a minefield of intrigues and rivalries to achieve power. His political career began early, but was initially modest. He served as priest of Jupiter, Flamandialis, in his youth, an office that conferred prestige, but also exposed him to the dangers of Roman politics. His connection with Marius, who was an enemy of Sulla, put him in a precarious position during Sulla's proscriptions. Caesar was forced to hide and flee Rome to avoid Sulla's persecution, a period that taught him about the brutality of Roman politics and the need to be ruthless to survive. However, his military ambition was evident from early on. Legend has it that, upon visiting a statue of Alexander the Great in Hispania, Caesar reportedly wept, lamenting that at Alexander's age, he had not yet achieved great deeds. This story, though perhaps apocryphal, reflects Caesar's thirst for military glory and his determination to surpass the feats of great conquerors. His early military career was also marked by acts of personal bravery. He was known for his courage on the battlefield, personally leading his men in combat and inspiring them with his own example. This bravery earned him the respect of his soldiers and the reputation of a leader who did not fear danger. His appointment as governor of Hispania Ulterior in 61 BC was a turning point in his military career. There, he led successful campaigns against local tribes, gaining experience in independent command and accumulating riches that would be crucial to finance his future political ambitions. He demonstrated his ability to organize and lead an army, to plan campaigns, and to achieve victories. Caesar's early military career was therefore a period of learning and consolidation. He was preparing for the challenges that awaited him, forging himself as a general who, one day, would lead legions in campaigns that would change the course of history. His military ambition, combined with his political genius, would lead him to challenge the limits of the Republic and build an empire that would echo for millennia. Julius Caesar's ascent in Roman politics was not a solitary path. He understood that to achieve supreme power in a republic dominated by factions and powerful generals, he needed allies. In 60 BC, Caesar forged a secret and unprecedented alliance with two of Rome's most influential men, Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, Pompey the Great,
and Marcus Licinius Crassus. This alliance, known as the First Triumvirate, was an informal pact of power that aimed to circumvent senatorial opposition and secure each man's political objectives. Roman values were the pillar of the Republic: virtus, courage, moral excellence; pietas, duty to the gods, family, and state; gravitas, dignity, seriousness; and fides, loyalty, trust. These values were taught from an early age and shaped the character of citizens. Military service and public service were considered the highest aspirations for a Roman citizen. However, the vastness of Roman expansion, which brought unprecedented wealth and power, also planted the seeds of its own decline. The colossal wealth from conquests, especially from the East, flowed into Rome, creating an extremely rich elite, but also a vast impoverished population. Social inequality deepened, with the urban plebes growing in number and discontent. Social tensions were palpable. The Gracchi brothers, in the 2nd century BC, tried to reform land distribution and the political system, but were brutally murdered, a sign that republican institutions could no longer contain internal divisions. The rise of powerful generals like Marius and Sulla, who commanded armies loyal to themselves and no longer to the Senate, marked the beginning of a new era. Their civil wars with proscriptions and bloodbaths demonstrated the fragility of republican institutions in the face of individual military power. The Republic, once a model of stability, was becoming a battlefield for personal ambitions, a colossus that, in its quest for dominion, was devouring itself from within. At the heart of Roman power was its army, the most efficient and feared war machine of the ancient world. Its evolution from a citizen militia to a professional force was crucial for Roman expansion, but also for its decline. In the 1st century BC, the Roman army was an unprecedented fighting force, known for its iron discipline, impeccable organization, and unwavering loyalty